Well, good morning. Welcome to the November issue of Sky Views, brought to you by the New Jersey State Museum Planetarium. My name is Bill Murray, planetarium technician at the planetarium. Let's take a look at some of the interesting sights visible in our November skies this year. I say good morning rather than good evening, as I usually do here on the Sky Views broadcast. Because the first sky event that I want to talk about is an early morning event for us here in New Jersey, and that is the last total eclipse of the moon this year, which takes place on the morning of November 8th. Lunar eclipses occur when the moon, in its orbit around the Earth, moves through the Earth's shadow. That doesn't happen every month, but it does happen fairly often. You usually get to see one or two lunar eclipses every year. This year we saw two. And so on the morning of November 8th, the full moon will be gradually blotted out as it moves through the Earth's shadow, called the umbra, the darkest part of the shadow. The timing for the events of the eclipse are shown here. Times are given in universal time. So if you want to translate that into Eastern Standard Time, subtract 5 hours from all of the times shown here. So just a little after 3 o'clock in the morning, the moon will begin entering the outer part of the Earth's shadow, the penumbra. Will be there for a little bit less than an hour before it starts moving into the darker part of the Earth's shadow, the umbra, about 4:09 a.m. This is when the eclipse will really start to become visible for us here in New Jersey. Over the next hour or so, the moon will gradually move into the umbra until it is completely inside the Earth's shadow. Mid-eclipse occurs at 5:59 a.m. when the sky should be beginning to get a little bit bright with dawn. The eclipse ends for us here in New Jersey at 6:42 a.m., which is just a few minutes after sunrise, and the moon will begin setting immediately after that. Shown here is the view of the sky at 5:16 on the morning of the 8th, just after the total part of the eclipse has begun, and we see that the moon occupies a very interesting part of the sky. It's located in the kind of dim autumn constellation of Aries the Ram, but just above Aries are the very bright constellations of winter. And so if you manage to get out on the morning of the 8th, before the eclipse begins, you will see the very bright full moon visible low in the western sky, obliterating most of these stars. The brighter ones will still come through full moonlight. But over the course of an hour or so, the moon will gradually dim and the stars will brighten. And by about 5:15, you should see a reddish dull moon low in the western sky and all of the bright constellations of winter gleaming above it. So if you have a good low western horizon and the skies are clear on the morning of November 8th and you're an early riser, get out and take a look at the last lunar eclipse of the year. Back in our evening skies after the lunar eclipse, we're now looking towards the south at 9 p.m. on the evening of November 10th. We can see the two bright planets that we've been talking about for the last few months. Off in the southwest is the planet Saturn, which is now beginning to sink lower in the west, located in the constellation of Capricornus. And high in our southern skies, just past the meridian, is the bright planet Jupiter, located in the constellation of Pisces. But they've now been joined by a third bright planet. If we turn our attention towards the east, we will see the constellations of winter beginning to rise above the eastern horizon. Very brightly, just above the eastern horizon, is the full moon, now 2 days past the eclipse, and just below the full moon is the planet Mars, which is now going to become very prominent in our evening skies. About every 2 years, Mars makes a close approach to the Earth called an opposition. That's when Mars is opposite from the Sun in our skies here on the Earth. And that's when it's closest to us here on the Earth. As I said, that will happen next month, so we'll have a lot more to say about Mars in December. Both the Moon and Mars are located in one of the most famous constellations in the night sky, the very ancient constellation of Taurus, the bull. So let's talk a little bit about Taurus, and also in particular one very bright and interesting object in the constellation of Taurus located right here, the star cluster known as the Pleiades. In ancient Greek mythology, Taurus was recognized as the form that the king of the gods, Zeus, took on when he wanted to seduce Europa, who was the princess of Tyre. And the story goes that one day Europa saw this beautiful bull by the side of the sea, and she went over to him. The bull was very calm and gentle, and she got onto his back, and eventually the bull dove into the sea and swam all the way from Phoenicia, where Tyre was, to the island of Crete. And at that point, Zeus revealed himself to Europa, and they fathered several children together and founded the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. Located to the right, or the southeast, of the Moon and Mars in the constellation of Taurus, is the brightest star in that constellation, Aldebaran, which represents the bull's eye. And almost directly above Aldebaran is the star cluster, the Pleiades, one of the brightest and most easily recognizable star clusters in the night sky. It's easily visible here in New Jersey, even with all the light pollution that we have. In mythology, the Pleiades were the 7 daughters of the Atlas Titan and Pleione, and they were being pursued by the giant Orion, and the god Zeus decided to help them, so he transformed them into stars and put them into the night sky, where they are still pursued by Orion, but he will never catch them. The Pleiades are important in many cultures throughout the world. They're mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Job. In Celtic culture, the midnight transit of the Pleiades through the meridian, which occurs in November, is associated with holidays such as Halloween and All Saints' Day. And in Mexican culture, it's associated with Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. The English poet Alfred Lord Tennyson memorably wrote about the Pleiades in his poem Locksley Hall when he described him in this verse: "Many a night from yonder ivied casement, ere I went to rest, did I look on great Orion, sloping slowly to the west. Many a night I saw the Pleiades rising through the mellow shade, glittering like a swarm of fireflies tangled in a silver braid." Writer J.R.R. Tolkien, in his epic trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, tells us that the Pleiades were even known to the peoples of Middle-earth. In that ancient place, they were called Remarath, also known as the Netted Stars. As I said earlier, the Pleiades are one of the few deep sky objects that are easily visible to the unaided eye. Just take a look towards the east if you have a low eastern horizon as twilight begins to fade on these early November nights, and you should have no trouble seeing them. They're also one of the few deep sky objects that actually appear better in binoculars or a finder scope than in a large telescope. The reason is that the Pleiades are so large that the field of view of telescopes often cut them off and you only see a few stars. But binoculars or a finder scope will bring out the glory of the whole cluster. Binoculars or a finder scope will also show that rather than the 6 or 7 stars visible to the unaided eye, the Pleiades actually consist of several dozen stars. Long exposure images through telescopes show that many of the stars are surrounded by a bluish haze. The Pleiades and other star clusters like it are late stages of star formation. Stars are born out of clouds of gas and dust called nebulas, and as more stars are born in those clouds, their radiation eventually dissipates the remaining gas in the clouds until it is all gone and you're left with just a star cluster of young stars. That's what we're seeing here in the Pleiades, but there still are a few remnants of that gas of the star formation visible in the cluster. One final cultural note about the Pleiades. The word for Pleiades in Japanese is Subaru. So if you've ever seen the logo for a Subaru automobile or owned one yourself and wondered why the logo has the form that it does, now you know. That's it for our November skies here at the New Jersey State Museum Planetarium. Until next month, when we'll talk about the opposition of Mars, clear skies to everyone.